The Imperial Fists are one of the first founding chapters of Space Marine, originally formed as the 7th Legion of the Legions Astartes. Raised by the Emperor himself during the Unification Wars, their origins are deeply rooted in their martial history, in particular that of Holy Terra itself. What sets the Imperial Fists apart from their brother chapters is a lack of a fixed homeworld. Instead of being bound to one singular planet, the Imperial Fists have, for over 10,000 years, called their colossal mobile fortress the legendary Phalanx, their fortress monastery. And while they maintain recruitment chapters scattered across various worlds, including Necromunda, their central presence has often been on Terra itself. During the era of the Great Crusade, the Imperial Fists would be tasked with a role of immense significance. They were the Emperor's Praetorians, his personal guardians, entrusted with accompanying him wherever he went. Their tactical expertise often made them the spearhead of many decisive engagements, dealing crushing blows to all the enemies of the nascent Imperium. However, after the Horus Heresy and the Emperor's mortal wounding, the responsibility of guarding his personhood was passed exclusively to the Adeptus Custodes, his personal bodyguards. Despite this shift, the honor of having once held such a trusted position granted to them by the Emperor still resonates deeply within the Imperial Fists chapter and many of their successors. This legacy remains a fundamental aspect of their identity, and it ensures their continued prominence and dedication to the Imperium, even in the present day after multiple near annihilations. The Imperial Fists were once the most revered and steadfast of the Space Marine chapters, and they are the proud heirs of the legacy of the legendary Primarch Rogal Dorn. Dorn's name is an enduring symbol of loyalty and resilience, which has been venerated by countless trillions across the Imperium over the millennia. However, some of the details of his early life are less certain than that of other Primarchs, such as Reboot Guilliman. When the Primarchs were originally scattered to the far reaches of the galaxy, Dorn's fate would be obscured for a significant amount of time, and what is known most clearly and agreed on by Imperial scholars completely is that when the Great Crusade reached the frozen ice hives of Inuit, Dorn would emerge, offering a gift that would cement his place in history. His offering was none other than the legendary Phalanx, one of the mightiest vessels ever constructed by the humans of the Dark Age of technology, which would be a powerful symbol of his fealty to the Emperor and the allegiance of Inuit. The Emperor, recognizing his long-lost son, would welcome Dorn into the fold and grant him command over the 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists. As the Primarch, as the Phalanx was Dorn's prized warship, it would be returned to him. While the Imperial Fists would eventually prove themselves as masters in all forms of warfare, their unmatched expertise in siegecraft, in particular in the defensive aspect, set them apart from all the other legions. They became renowned for their ability to both build and breach most formidable fortifications, a talent that stoked a fierce rivalry between them and the Iron Warriors Legion, along with their Primarch Perturabo. This bitter enmity was aggravated by Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children, who intentionally sowed discord between the two. Fulgrim seemed to enjoy stirring the flames of rivalry, and once went as far as to question whether a fortress designed by Dorn could withstand the Iron Warriors, which led to the confident reply from Dorn that it could, showing that Dorn unintentionally played into Fulgrim's hand, who knew it would be seen as a personal slight by Perturabo, which planted the seeds of hatred that would fester and deepen over time, long before the heresy itself would actually begin. In the turbulent times that would follow, as Horus's betrayal unfolded, determining loyalty would become increasingly difficult. The face of a once trusted ally could no longer reveal whether they remained steadfast or had turned traitor, even after Horus's treachery was revealed on Isstvan III and the catastrophic dropsite massacre occurred on Isstvan V. The lines between friend and foe would become significantly blurred, leaving a long-standing mark, which caused the Imperial Fists to forever hold some great amount of suspicion and uncertainty in the wake of this betrayal. In an age marked by treachery where even the most trusted of allies could not be relied upon, it seems one legion would remain resolute in all instances in their loyalty. The Imperial Fists, led by their indomitable Primarch, Rogal Dorn, throughout both civil war Throughout the brutal civil war-torn Imperium, the Imperial Fists would stand unyielding, never faltering in their devotion to the Emperor, to the point that other legions did not even dare question their loyalty, or if it could be swayed in any way. Despite the heavy toll such loyalty demanded, the sacrifices they endured shaped those who survived forevermore, leaving scars both physical and mental. The ultimate test of Dorn's fortifications would come in the climactic Siege of Terra, when the traitor legions led by Horus assaulted the very heart of the Imperium, and it was the defenses that Rogal Dorn had meticulously crafted around the Imperial Palace which faced the relentless assault, and none of those assaults were more savage than those of the World Eaters, who breached the walls through sheer brutal force rather than any strategic brilliance. Yet the full outcome of the siege would be left unresolved, as while the War Master Horus would fall in combat to the Emperor himself would be brutally wounded in combat. The rivalry between the Imperial Fists and the Iron Warriors would reach its bitter peak shortly after the Heresy, during an infamous event known as the Iron Cage Confrontation. This battle was fought during the height of the Great Scouring, and saw the two legions clashed with unrestrained fury. The details of what transpired within the Iron Cage remain hotly debated by some to this day, with many Imperial Fists and their supporters claiming victory over the Iron Warriors, while many Imperial historians claim that realistically the Iron Warriors all but decimated the Imperial Fists. And in part due to this, the brutal contest may never truly become fully agreed upon, but the hatred between those two legions had never burned more fiercely. Though Rogal Dorn would eventually be lost to the Imperium in the grim years following the Horus Heresy, his legacy endures. His chapter sired three rather well-known second founding successor chapters. The Imperial Fists would in essence sire the Crimson Fists, the Black Templars, and the Fists Exemplars. Each of these chapters has earned as many battle honors as entire foundings of Adeptus Astartes created in later centuries. Their deeds etched them into the records of Imperial history due to their courage, which had led them to prove themselves in battlefields spanning the galaxy over. The Imperial Fists remain to this day paragons of the Codex Astartes, exemplars of what it means to be a space marine, barring one or two deviations. For 10,000 years, they have stood as an unyielding shield for the Emperor and for humanity, the bulwark against which traitors and Xenos alike have been shattered. Their steadfastness, passed down directly from Rogal Dorn himself, has been both their greatest strength and their grievous burden. Time and time again they have refused to retreat even when logic or caution would suggest otherwise, pulling victories from the jaws of defeat at a terribly high cost, as the Imperial Fists have been pushed to the edge of extinction multiple times. Dorn's legacy of courage, sacrifice, and his indomitable will continues to drive the Imperial Fists to this day, ensuring their place as one of the Imperium's greatest defenders. Now with the overview over, we can more closely focus in on the history of the Imperial Fists proper. The Wars of Unification marked a pivotal chapter in the history of the Imperium, for it was during this brutal era that the Emperor began his greatest work, forging humanity's future from the war-torn ashes of Holy Terra. In this time, if the Emperor was the father of the legions Astartes, then Terra itself would be its mother, the cradle from which they were wrought. As much as the Emperor's will and intellect shaped these warriors, so too would the scars of Terra's blood-soaked past influence their culture and values, along with the methods of war they would become renowned for. To understand the legacy of the Space Marine legions, one must first look at Terra's fractured and violent history before the Emperor's proper rise. Old Earth was but a desolate world, steeped in chaos and devoid of hope. Tyrants ruled over the shattered remnants of a once great empire, imposing their brief and brutal orders, often marked by both madness and fleeting ambition. It was a time defined by bloodshed, ignorance, and atrocities, with no light to pierce the endless dark of humanity's crumbling future. It was then that the Emperor, in his unparalleled wisdom, sought to change that, as he rallied the first techno-barbarian tribes under his banner, assembling his early forces. From this foundation, he created the legendary gene-forged Thunder Warriors, and then, with his unmatched foresight, he would craft the great legions Astartes. These genetically enhanced warriors would be his ultimate instrument to subdue Terra, and eventually the galaxy itself. With fire and blood, the Emperor tamed a world ravaged by war, replacing madness with order and despair with enlightenment. It was this newly transformed world that the 7th Legion, later known as the Imperial Fists, was destined to defend. The 7th Legion origins lie deeply within Terra itself. Unlike many of their other brother legions, which drew recruits from specific regions or ethnicities, the 7th was formed from the diverse peoples of Terra's whole. Their earliest battle honor was Roma, which bore witness to their broad recruitment, taking the best from every region wherever they could find them, even going so far as to recruit from regions where other legions had secured the exclusive rights of tithes. The 7th Legion claimed some of the most resilient and determined youths for their ranks in such a manner. These aspirants were chosen not only for their physical endurance, but for their mental fortitude, qualities that would go on to define the Legion, in particular with their relentless discipline and their stalwart determination. Many of these early warriors were of a taciturn nature, speaking little but acting swiftly, decisively, and efficiently. In the crucible of the Unification Wars, these warriors were forged, their identities shaped by both the Emperor's vision and the brutal world that they emerged from. It was this shared legacy that rooted them in Terra's darkest days and illuminated their fate by the Emperor's guiding hand, which would give rise to one of the Imperium's most enduring and stalwart defenders, the 7th Legion, the Sons of Rogal Dorn. Now, despite drawing from all over Terra, there seems to have been some questions, in particular why so many of the recruits of the 7th Legion shared so many traits remains unanswered. Some historians speculate that the Legion's intense and agonizing gene seed activation process may have required a very specific type of candidate, those who could endure specific amounts of overwhelming pain, trauma, along with other issues coming from the transformation. It's possible too that once a pattern of recruitment was established, the Imperial Fists, being rather stubborn, turned it into a tradition, perpetuated without question. Regardless of the reason, the grim and resolute nature of their recruits seemed to perfectly align with the demands placed on the 7th Legion. In warfare, the 7th Legion was primarily concerned with conquest, as in true conquest, not just military victory, like other legions. While all the Emperor's forces fought to expand the Imperium, the Imperial Fists held a broader and more enduring vision. To truly conquer, they believed that one not only had to defeat their enemy, but also hold their territory permanently and ensure its loyalty to the Imperium. Destroying a stronghold or breaking the morale of a population was not enough. Left unchecked, those lands could rebel, or worse, become a vulnerability for enemies to exploit. Victory on the battlefield was merely the first step. This philosophy permeated every action of the 7th Legion. In battle, they would pay any price in blood to secure a decisive victory, but once that victory was won, they turned immediately to consolidation. Their focus was not just on defeating the enemy, but ensuring that what was taken remained firmly in the Imperium's hands. A perfect example of this can be found on the later conquests of ancient Terra. It was the Imperial Fists who brought low the cities of the Crystal Sea and rebuilt them from the rubble. But rather than just rebuild them to substandard livable conditions, they turned the ruins into the mighty fortress of the 5th Circle. In the frozen heights of the Himalayan peaks, the Legion sacrificed 3 entire battalions to crush the witchery of the Windcaller clans. Yet within days of that hard-fought victory, the Imperial Fists began to raise bastions against the icy skies. Across the surface of Terra, the fortifications of the 7th Legion would stand as unwavering reminders of the newly conquered territories. Each fortress was a statement of the Imperium's strength and a clear message that the Imperial Fists would fiercely hold what they won. In just the first decade of their existence, the Imperial Fists constructed 600 citadels across Terra. Legends persist that the dead of the Legion still rest within the foundations of these fortresses, their skulls and blood mingled with the stone and mortar of the cities. Each citadel is not merely a monument to victory, but but rather a tribute to the sacrifice of those who gave their lives for conquest, ensuring that the strength of the Imperium would not just be etched into the land, but deeply rooted within its very foundation. With these fortresses firmly rooted within the lands they had conquered, the 7th Legion's influence ensured that order would spread throughout the newly conquered domains. The presence of these imposing strongholds would also serve as a powerful deterrent against rebellion. The old ways, once woven into the fabric of these societies, would either be replaced, assimilated, or intentionally fall to ruin under the watchful gaze of the Imperial Fists. If dissent simmered, the looming fortifications provided a stark and inevitable answer. Resistance would be met with a swift and crushing retribution. Yet the 7th Legion was more than master builders or guards of fortified domains. At their core, they embodied the Emperor's grand vision of unifying humanity under one rule. They were crusaders of the highest order, and their true purpose was that of conquest. For them, a fortress was simply a solidification of victory, a tangible mark of domination. But conquest, the act of breaking new grounds and bringing rebellious realms to heel, was their true calling. The 7th Legion never lingered long after victory. No sooner had they secured a region and erected their fortifications than they moved on, always advancing the frontiers of the Imperium, then fortifying before moving on, ever hungry for new challenges. Their method of warfare was brutally efficient, utilizing massed shock assaults and overwhelming force. In battle, the full might of the Legion's arsenal was unleashed, with battalions deploying en masse, breaking the enemy lines with the irresistible force of a mighty sledgehammer. One striking example of this method was seen on the plains of Kinstar, where the 5th Battalion launched a devastating assault on the Tri-Sea forces. With 50 war machines arrayed in a deadly arrowhead formation, they would shatter the enemy lines with an assault so fierce that it is said that the dust cloud from the advance blotted out the sun, casting a literal shadow over their enemies. In the underground tunnels of Galblitz, the 7th Legion demonstrated their siege mastery by collapsing the crust above the buried city, then descending into the now exposed tunnels before the very echoes of the explosions had faded. But even in the wake of such destruction, they immediately set out to fortify what they had conquered, replacing the broken with something stronger, more enduring, nigh everlasting. It was through these relentless early campaigns that the 7th Legion earned their name. As witnesses observed the lands falling under the control, as many likened it to an unyielding grip of the Emperor himself, a force that held fast with an unbreakable fist. And this vivid description seemed to resonate deeply with the Emperor himself, who decreed that they would henceforth be the Imperial Fists, in recognition of their unyielding service, going so far as to bestow them with the right to bear the laurels of victory as part of their official heraldry. True to their nature, the newly renamed Imperial Fists would accept these honors with the same stoic resolve that they had always shown, as they would be dutiful and silent, ever focused on their next quest. Now, to further understand the Legion, we must focus in on the Primarch, their Gene-sire Rogal Dorn, as the Primarchs were not merely mortals, but transcended extraplanar beings and embodiments of the extraordinary. Each one held a fragment of the sublime, a part of the unfathomable in their very essence. These traits would become admired and even mirrored to some extent in the warriors of the Space Marine legions. However, even the greatest Space Marine is but a mere shadow when compared to the presence of their towering Primarch. Though born from the genes of humanity, the Primarchs were not human in the traditional sense. Their nature was elevated beyond their genetic origins, and in many cases, the qualities of the Primarchs intensified the unique traits within their respective legions once they met. When a Primarch was reunited with their legion, it seemed a remarkable transformation would always follow. The legion's character would evolve, reflecting the influence of its genetic sire. And in the case of the Imperial Fists, this union brought about not a radical shift, but rather a deepening in the traits that they had long displayed since their inception. The arrival of the Primarch, Rogal Dorn, would serve to amplify their unyielding nature, in particular, their stoicism and their mastery and love of siegecraft. The story of Rogal Dorn is one that reflects many of the other Primarchs, one shaped by both fate and the designs of malevolent forces along with the world's worst mother, as the 20 nascent Primarchs, each a genetic masterpiece, were stolen from the Emperor's laboratories on Terra by Erda, history's worst mother, scattering what amounted to newborns across the vast galaxy by casting them into literal hell. But eventually, each of the Primarchs would arrive on a different world. These worlds, with their unique cultures and environments, would leave indelible imprints on each of the Primarchs, shaping their characters and the future of their legions. Rogal Dorn would be eventually found on the frigid ice world of Inwit, located in the Inwit cluster of Segmentum Tempestus. Inwit's harsh climate, with its biting cold and unyielding ice, forged a culture of resilience and survival, traits which were reflected strongly within Rogal Dorn himself. From these frozen wastes emerged a Primarch whose iron will was within him and served to double down on his unwavering sense of duty, one which would come to define the Imperial Fists themselves. And once Rogal Dorn was brought from Inwit, he would instill the spirit of the world within his legion. Inwit itself was a world as unforgiving as it was ancient, perpetually lying in the twilight of its existence. As the planet's sun was an old and dying star, it wound up casting a feeble red glow over only one side of the world, while the other remained tidally locked in perpetual darkness. Inwit was a place where life clinged on desperately, eking out but the merest existence on the edges of oblivion. The dark side of Inwit was known as the Splintered Land. It was a place of frozen crevasses, towering mountain ranges, and shifting dunes of frost and snow. It was a wilderness. It is a wilderness where survival was a daily battle, shaped not only by the extreme cold, but by the monstrous beasts which roamed this desolate landscape. The people who survived here were hardened, as their bodies and spirits were forged in a crucible of the brutal environment. Beneath the thick, icy crusts lay sluggish seas which flowed swiftly, and its depths were inhabited by pale, sightless creatures that hunted by sensing vibrations in the water. These predators possessed a preternatural thirst for blood, adding yet another layer of danger to the life on this frozen world. High above the icy desolation, ancient space stations and orbital shipyards hovered, casting their gaze upon the cold expanse below. These citadels of the void were relics of a forgotten era, and had been suspended in orbit for so long that records of their construction no longer exist. Their perpetual presence, coupled with the eerie auras that danced around the planet's atmosphere, gave Inwit an air of timelessness, unchanging, eternal, and brutal. The light side of Inwit, however, while not as harsh as the dark, offered little in the way of reprieve. Its landscapes dominated by drift-crusted saline seas and barren rocky expanses, all under the fading red light of a dying sun. It was a world without riches, this half of the seas in essence lifeless or buried, its mountains barren of valuable minerals, the native species so vicious and adapted so perfectly to the harshest conditions that they were a danger to any who challenged them. Yet despite these hardships, Inwit produced something much more valuable than gold and jewels: its people. It was through this crucible that their unrelenting spirit and the strength of the human population would shine, leading them to conquer the star cluster and endure throughout the age of strife. These people, shaped by the unforgiving ice world, were seen as some of the premier survivors of humanity, unyielding, resilient, and fiercely disciplined. It is no surprise, then, that from this world would come Rogal Dorn, the Primarch whose indomitable will and stoic disposition would define the Imperial Fists evermore, and leave an indelible, unshaking mark in the Imperium's history. Though they may seem barbaric by some standards, the warriors of Inwit were far from unsophisticated. Born into a world of unyielding cold and constant threats, they were shaped into individuals who believed weakness was death, not only for the individual, but for their entire kin group. Death on Inwit would take many forms, from ice storms, which could freeze a man solid in seconds, to predators from the splintered lands, from the deepest, darkest shadows of the world's oceans, and even the smallest lapse in vigilance could allow these monstrosities to temporarily breach the warmth seals of a hold, condemning an entire family or multiple families to a frozen tomb of their own creation. This environment made survival paramount, as it was not simply about living to see another day, but ensuring that one's people would endure in a way that strongly mirrors the Imperial Fists. Now, it must be noted that unlike many would come to believe later, the people of Inuit were largely nomadic, moving between subterranean hive cities hewn from ice to trade in the essentials of life: weapons, fuels, advanced technologies, and food. Conflict between these roaming clans was rather commonplace, with young warriors trained in the arts of both defense and conquest from a very young age, as they would not simply learn how to fight, but they would learn how to thrive in the most unforgiving of environments, to measure the value of every resource, and to adapt or take by force the knowledge that they needed from others. Long before the Emperor's rise on Terra, the people of Inuit had begun to reach for the stars, knowing that humanity was born to inherit the stars. As their empire expanded, with each world they took, they assimilated what was useful and realigned local resources to reinforce their positions, leading their empire to expand. But Inuit itself, its cold, its challenges, its relentless drive for survival remained unchanged, becoming the harsh heart of a small stellar realm, and the crucible from which generations of great warriors and leaders were forged. And it would be here where Rogal Dorn's gestation pod would land. As here, in the ice hives of Inuit, with their unyielding hardships and ever-present clan disputes persisted, despite the technological advances of the world, even as starships were birthed and orbital weapon stations were used to conquer other planets. Inuit's rulers would hold as steadfast to ancient customs and traditions as possible, since they saw them as the very ways that they had forged their strength. As warlords and matriarchs who commanded entire armies amongst the stars would live lives little different from their vassals, embracing the same cold rigors that shaped the people's endurance. So it was then, and so it remains today. It was within this austere and unrelenting world that Rogal Dorn would grow into manhood, and eventually, as most of the Primarchs, he would rise to rulership. However, he did not merely inherit the power of the Inuit cluster, he earned it through trials as harsh as the frozen world itself. Much of Dorn's childhood remains somewhat shrouded in mystery, or at least it's seldom spoken in any consistent fashion. What is certain, however, is that from the cold desolation of Inuit, a boy named Rogal Dorn was raised by House Dorn, and he would come to lead the Ice Caste and eventually govern the entire Inuit cluster as its emperor. One notable tale from this was of the Primarch's adopted clan. In particular, a man of great wisdom and strength within the clan would become a surrogate grandfather to him, imprinting the arts of strategy, tactics, and leadership. Even after discovering that he shared no blood with the man who had raised him, Dorn maintained a profound respect for the man who had become his, in essence, parent. In a poignant reminder to this bond, Dorn has kept a fur-edged robe belonging to his grandfather, and he would continuously sleep with the robe draped across his bed every night until his disappearance. Dorn's personal qualities, in particular his disciplined nature and his tactical brilliance, along with his commitment towards duty, aligned with the harsh values shared from his homeworld, in particular from his grandfather's clan. And under his leadership, the Inuit cluster's empire would expand further than ever before, as he meticulously organized and trained his armies, shaping them into forces of nigh unparalleled strength within the region. Moreover, Dorn's technological acumen led to the creation of spacecraft which were far superior to those that had come before it, advancing his people's influence and power across the stars. In many ways, Rogal Dorn was the living embodiment of Inuit, cold, unyielding, and fiercely disciplined, but loyal to his family. His rise to power did not mark a divergence from the world that had raised him, but rather a continuation of its values and an amplification of it by his extraordinary capabilities. Dorn would take these qualities with him as he would eventually be reunited with the Emperor, once becoming a stalwart leader of the Imperial Fists, whose new roots would be forged with the same discipline and icy exterior. Do not look to us for kindness. Do not look to us for hope. We are not the kind children of this new age. We are the rocks of its foundation. If you seek hope, then look to what we create. If you seek kindness, turn to those who will follow in our footsteps. Excerpt from Rogal Dorn, addressed to the collected 300 magistrates of Terra. 40 standard years after the death of his adopted grandfather, the distant imperial ships of the Great Crusade would finally reach the hives of Inuit in 835 M30. This monumental event marked the reunion of Rogal Dorn with the true emperor, his father. In this moment, the Emperor regained not just a long-lost son, but the potential of a star-spanning society that had already been meticulously shaped into a formidable tool of war. Dorn greeted the Emperor aboard the Phalanx, an immense ship constructed during the Dark Age of technology, which in large part had been fixed under his guidance once it was unearthed from within Inuit's region of space. With this encounter, Dorn became the 7th of the 20 Primarchs to be discovered by their father. The Emperor welcomed Dorn with open arms, embracing him as a son reunited from the shadows of history. And even though he was gifted the Phalanx, he would entrust it back into Dorn's care, after transforming it into a fortress monastery for the 7th Space Marine Legion, a legion which had been crafted from Dorn's own genetic template, making it a living testament to his legacy and in essence, biological children to him. This moment was not only significant for their reunion, but it heralded the dawn of a new chapter, a new saga for humanity, as the Emperor and Dorn would be prepared to embark on the next phase of the Great Crusade, and it would become quickly evident that their bond would not merely shape the Imperial Fists, but it would also resonate deeply with the Imperium itself. Together, they would stand as bulwarks against the ever-encroaching darkness, forging a path forward amidst the turmoil of an unforgiving galaxy. From the very moment Rogal Dorn had met the Emperor on the bridge of the Phalanx, he had pledged his unwavering loyalty, never once seeking favor from his gene-sire. Dorn would epitomize humanity's relentless pursuit for truth, as he could not even tell a lie if he so desired, even when such a falsehood may have served his cause. And to many this would come off as obtuse. However, this unwavering integrity would be memorialized in stone, in particular as Dorn's statue stands as one of only 4 erected on Macragge, standing right alongside Reboot Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines. As commander of the 7th Legion and its expeditionary fleets, Dorn displayed an unparalleled devotion for military acumen, as he was renowned for possessing one of the foremost brilliant minds, in particular regarding any military aspect, amongst his brethren. His strategies were marked by a meticulous order and discipline, which rivaled even the mighty Perturabo. Dorn's records of achievement during the Great Crusade is rather vast, as the War Master Horus held Dorn and the Imperial Fists in such high esteem that he believed that if the Imperial Fists, the Masters of Defense, were to occupy a fortress against the Luna Wolves, famed for their assault tactics, the ensuing conflict would likely delve into an unending and unrelenting stalemate. This respect was not merely reflective of Dorn and his legion, but also of the pivotal role they had been chosen to play for the Imperium's existence. Rogal Dorn was known as a figure of nigh singular determination, his energy always focused, singularly yet tempered by a reserved, stoic nature. While many observers have noted the grim and seemingly emotionless disposition of both Dorn and his legion, such assessments seem to overlook the depth of his character. Beneath the calm exterior seemed to lie a formidable presence, which, when provoked, Dorn's wrath was shown to be as terrifying as it was powerful, capable of shaking the very foundations of even the most resilient individual's resolve. During the harrowing resurgence of the Zanchian breed in the Adonis cluster, Dorn's cold fury was instrumental in maintaining the battlements while wielding influence as a formidable weapon, which his sons learned to mirror, going so far as his admonishments of the reinforcements at Castorus being so resonant that it seemed to echo from the skies to the still burning seas. Leman Russ of the Space Wolves Legion famously described him as swift and unforgiving as the falling edge of an axe. Yet Dorn's complexity extended beyond mere martial prowess. He was prone to brooding, allowing his worries to fester beneath his stoic facade. Although he epitomized absolute loyalty as a warrior, Dorn was also a true idealist. For him, the principles underlying his battles were significant as the victories themselves. This duality of purpose as a warrior and an idealist defined not only his character, but the very essence of the Imperial Fists as they forged their legacy throughout the Great Crusade. During the Great Crusade itself, the true depths of Rogal Dorn's character largely would remain obscured from view. Only a select few who knew him intimately might have glimpsed the complexity of his more critical moments, such as his near-fatal encounter with Conrad Kurz of the Night Lord's Legion in the Charut system, and a brief schism with Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, following an especially brutal campaign. It was only in the aftermath of the catastrophic events of the Horus Heresy, when the Imperium lay in ruins and its blood-soaked history etched forever in grief, that a more nuanced understanding of the man would emerge. This period revealed that even the most steadfast of loyalty can harbor an inherent flaw. A truth which resonated throughout the ages, as at the time the Imperial Fists' union with Rogal Dorn did remain strong. The specter of potential betrayal still loomed ominously in the future. However, the integration of Rogal Dorn with the Imperial Fist was one of the more seamless and profound of all the Primarchs and their legions. The ideals of the Imperium and overreaching purpose of the Great Crusade resonated harmoniously with Rogal Dorn's own intrinsic motivations and ambitions. The warriors of the Imperial Fists embodied not only the achievements that he had forged in Inuit, but also represented the vision that he harbored for their shared future. Thus, despite all this, the legacy was strengthened due to their interactions rather than in spite of it. From the very first moment Dorn encountered his Genesons, he demanded from them the same unwavering commitment he expected from himself. Upon meeting Legion Master Mathis and the veteran contingents of the Imperial Fists, Dorn maintained a profound silence, even as they knelt before him in solemn fealty. Only after observing their prowess in battle did he finally break his silence, conveying his expectations with a stark clarity. He proclaimed that they had as much to accomplish as they had to learn. To Mathis, he offered a single, heartfelt word of thanks for his dedicated service and elevated him to the esteemed position of High Castellan of the Inuit cluster. This honor carried with it a heavy responsibility, as Dorn's next in command was to rise 30 regiments of Imperial Fists from the Inuit system. Without pausing to reflect, Rogal Dorn and his Genesons launched back into the Crusades, despite being separated for so long. Over the course of the next 16 solar decades, the Imperial Fists would emerge as some of the most fierce warriors in the Imperium. They seemed to shine on the burning frontiers of the Great Crusade in particular. Relentlessly, they would surge from one war zone to another, earning the admiration of their brother legions and rising in the esteem of many across the Imperium. Their martial methods reflected the hard-earned lessons of Inuit, coupled with the echoes of the 7th Legion's previous victories. As they advanced, they would fortify. As they would fortify, they would advance and construct defenses to secure their conquests. Yet they refused to linger on as rulers. While a Castellan and a contingent of Astartes warriors might remain to oversee the defenses of a newly acquired world, they did not take on the role of administrators or lawmakers. The Imperial Fists understood their purpose precisely. They were warriors of the Imperium, not overlords. Their existence was defined by service in war and their willingness to lay down their lives for the Imperium's survival. What they did seek from each world they conquered were new recruits, warriors to join their ranks, alongside the ongoing struggle for humanity's future. One notable instance of the Imperial Fists' commitment to their purpose could be traced to the Imperial compliance on the now renowned world of Necromunda, where they secured a significant victory against the Orcs in the treacherous ash wastes of the Hive World. In recognition of their valor, the Hive Worlds graciously consented to allow recruits to be drawn from their populace. A fortress chapel would be constructed on the world, yet the Imperial Fists maintained their positions in essence as esteemed guests rather than conquerors. Rogal Dorn explicitly sought no special privileges on the worlds from which the Imperial Fists recruited, unlike the other Primarchs, such as the ever-increasingly volatile Perturabo, who seized every opportunity to establish a garrison and claim tithes from newly acquired territories. Dorn declared, "I want recruits, not vassals." He was contented to keep his legion focused solely on military endeavors, shunning the civil and political responsibilities that accompanied the governance of a legion homeworld. Through the Great Crusade, the Imperial Fists would serve primarily as a strategic reserve for many of the Emperor's forces, a testament to their ability to rapidly deploy onto critical battlefields aboard the legendary Phalanx, along with their meticulous planning and adaptability allowing them to excel as urban combatants along with siege specialists, earning a rather formidable reputation within the Imperium. Following numerous campaigns that resulted in the annexation of thousands of worlds into the Imperium, the Emperor returned to Terra in order to establish a central capital from which to govern his burgeoning empire. And he would bring the Imperial Fists with him, designating them as his protectors and entrusting Rogal Dorn with the critical task of constructing the defenses of the Imperial Palace. This monumental assignment did not go unnoticed by the other Primarchs. In particular, Perturabo, the Primarch of the Iron Warriors, was incensed upon learning that Dorn believed that his Imperial Palace could withstand even the mightiest assaults from the siege specialists of his own legion. His rage would erupt into a torrent of unfounded accusations and vitriol, leaving even his own followers and allies speechless at the ferocity of the outburst. In the aftermath, communications between Dorn and Perturabo became scarce, and their respective legions would not serve alongside each other in any future campaigns. While the Imperial Fists would remain steadfast at the Emperor's side, the Iron Warriors became integral to Horus's vanguard, for reasons that would become clear later, setting the stage for future conflicts and rivalries within the Imperium.